welcome everybody. I'd like to open the school board meeting for, what day is it? Let's start over. Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order for the school board, and at this time, we will stand for invocation, and then we will have South Brunswick High School present our colors. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for this time. We ask you to just be with us as decisions are made that affect all those in this county and beyond. We ask you to give us wisdom and guidance in all that we do. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Forward, march. Left turn, march. Color guard, halt. Present, arms. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, arms. Mark time, march. Right turn, march. Left turn, march.
May be seated. Tonight we have board salutes for our holiday card contest winners.
Ms. Ennis will be conducting that, and I will be joining her in just a moment.
The Superintendent's Winter Card Contest is one of the longest-running competitions that we have to celebrate visual art. And this year, of our 19 schools, 14 of them submitted entries into this contest. So it was quite difficult for the review committee to make the selections. We have some very talented students. So I'm very pleased to announce that our winners are in the K2 category. And if you please come up to the front, Isaac Perry, grade 1, Jessie Mae Monroe. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. The next student is also from Jessie Mae Monroe, Celine Tendo, grade 4 for the 3-5 category. I want to share that they're getting a set of their cards, and they're also getting a very attractive board certificate. And this year, look, isn't that neat? Something they can hang and enjoy. Thank you. Our parents here, please stand. And Ms. Ryder, the art teacher, and we have an administrator.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Williams is sick.
Okay, well, we are so glad that you could come out tonight and celebrate with us. Okay, for middle school, for our 6-8 category, we have Savannah Stanley, 6th grader from Cedar Grove Middle School. Great. Congratulations. Okay, Cedar Grove. The teacher is Heather Caldwell. Parents? Parents here tonight? And also principal, Mr. Page. Thank you so much for being so supportive. And finally, in our high school category 9-12, we have Maxwell McCorkle, 12th grader from South Brunswick High School. Congratulations. Wonderful.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, for Maxwell, do we have parents here tonight or family? Thank you. Art teacher Ian Sands. Any other comments? Okay, thank you so much. Now, Dr. Oaks reminded me that Mr. Perry is here tonight. Mr. Perry, would you like to come up and get your son's?
Sure will.
This,
And if he's on the way, if it pleases the board, once he comes.
Absolutely.
yes, yes.
But we'll get a picture with his dad.
That's a mighty big first grader, isn't it? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, and now, exciting comprehensive annual financial report.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. Before you should have a bound set of financial statements. This is your comprehensive annual financial report. It includes your audited financial statements as well as some extra information, a letter of transmittal, and a statistical section, which is sent off to two other organizations for their review, and their awards usually come in the spring. But the actual financial statement part, the footnotes, the compliance section, those are all part of the LGC contract. It's a three-party contract. The board hires us to audit management, and the LGC approves that contract and the financial statements. So those statements have already been sent to the LGC and approved at this stage. So, but what we're going over here, again, is a larger report that includes that other information that is sent for further review by the GFOA and the ASBO organizations. So I am going to quickly go over the 99-page report and point out a couple of numbers, but I don't want to, I'm going to start where sometimes I usually end this conversation, in that the amount of time that goes into preparing this document could not be done without the help of management. And in front of you should also have a 3-page letter, again, as the governing body that hired us to audit management. That 3-page letter just lets you know that the audit went fine, that it went according to plan. Aside from not having any findings within the statements, we're also letting you know that we didn't have any disagreements with management as far as accounting treatment. They didn't have large misstatements that went uncorrected. There were not a significant amount of journal entries. That kind of information, if that was found during those audit procedures, those types of things would have been noted in this audit if there was any difficulties. So, again, this 99-page report, without the help of management, we come in and we spend hundreds of hours. At the end of the audit, we have binders with over 1,000 pages of information, both from staff and from ourselves, as far as audit programs and memos and copies of everything that we pull. We pull hundreds of invoices and paychecks to audit, and we go through. This year, it seems every year there's unique situations. This year, you had almost $10 million of new state funding for hurricane relief. So figuring out how that treatment should be presented. That money was given by DPI, by the state legislatures, with no thought of how it was going to be handled going forward. They just knew you needed it, and they had to get it to you. So, again, every year there's unique situations that take time and effort and a knowledge of both governmental accounting treatment, and financial statements that all plays a part in, again, preparing this 99 pages. But inside there's a couple pages I want to point out. So you first have about 8 or 9 pages of, again, letters from management, just a letter to those organizations reviewing the CAFR. But if you actually turn to page 1, not the numerical number 1, but page 1, that is the independent auditor's report. This is, if I had to frame something to present, like those postcards, it would be this letter. This letter basically represents what's considered a clean, unmodified opinion letter. And the paragraph that's most important on that letter is at the bottom of page 1, and it basically states that we believe that these financial statements are accurate. So, again, we're hired by you to audit management to let you know that the statements are accurate, not necessarily whether they're good or bad, but because we audit 50 schools around the state, I can add some commentary as we go as far as whether the numbers are good or bad, as far as increases and decreases. But again, this letter states that they're accurate. All right. Next, if you would turn to page 13. This is your balance sheet for your governmental funds. These are the funds where most of your dollars come from. You also have business-type funds for your school food service fund, but majority of your funding is through governmental funds, your general fund, state public school fund, federal grants fund, restricted revenue fund, capital outlay fund, and the individual schools fund. So those funds are all considered your governmental funds. They make up your $175 million budget, and this page 13, Exhibit 3, is the balance sheet for those funds. Now, the state public school fund and the federal grants funds, they carry no fund balance. That money is use it or lose it. So their balance sheet is essentially made up of $300,000 and $53,000, even though you get $80 million from the state. So the balance sheet is very small relative to the percentage of funding, but that's just because, again, those funds are use it or lose it. Your fund balance is really carried in your general fund, and this year, uniquely, in the capital outlay fund. Your general fund balance is at the bottom of that first column. Total fund balance is $12.8 million, of which $10.7 million is available for appropriation. Your capital outlay fund this year has $9.9 million of fund balance. The capital outlay fund the last 2 years has had two unique situations. First, 2 years ago, you had the energy lease that you started. That money was front-loaded. You received a giant chunk of money and then spent it, pulled it down from BB&T to spend for changing your lights. So you had a large spike in fund balance 2 years ago that you've essentially used a lot of this year. But now in the 2019 year, you also received $10 million of state funds for hurricane relief. And of that $9.8 million, you've yet to spend $5.8. So if you look on the capital outlay column, there's actually two types of fund balance this year. That's unique. Normally you'll just see the $4 million of capital outlay fund balance, but you also have a new line for hurricane relief, $5.8 million of your fund balance, if it goes unused, has to be sent back to DPI. And that was part of the stipulation with that hurricane relief money. They sent it to you. They want you to spend it to do the repairs, do the work you need to do. But any money that you got reimbursed from insurance or FEMA, any excess money goes back to DPI. So we're setting aside that fund balance. That $5.8 million is the net unspent money. So you've received $9.8 million from the state, you received some insurance money, you received some FEMA money, and then all the expenditures associated with those repairs, they all get netted together, and as of right now, June 30, 2019, you've got $5.8 million left to spend or send back. Are there any questions about those fund balance numbers? Again, you got two basically competing situations going on in that capital outlay affecting fund balance, and then like I said, the $12 million of general fund balance. All right, if you turn to page 15, this represents the income statement for those same funds. Your general fund collects $40 million, state public school fund $79 million, almost $8 million in federal grants funds. You see $43 million in capital outlay. Again, that's your bond money that you're spending. It's the $10 million of the state hurricane relief funds. And then 2 years ago, it was $15 million of that energy money. So the capital outlay fund budget this year is a lot bigger in the last few years. It'll continue to be for the next few years as you spend down that bond money. So all in all, $175 million budget. Again, the most important column probably is that general fund balance number increased by $3.5 million this year. That was from 9.4 the previous year to 12.8. A year ago, you actually used $138,000 of fund balance, so a pretty significant increase in the 2019 year. Capital outlay used $3.7 million of fund balance. And again, that's those cross-competing where you're spending money that you had received, but then also receiving $10 million of that hurricane money. All right, any other questions? Or any questions at all on those? Again, those are your governmental funds. Page 21 is the balance sheet for your one business type fund, your school food service fund. Your school food service fund, you can't really look at fund balance anymore. A couple years ago, they started adding pension requirements and post-employment benefit requirements to be added to the actual financial statements of the counties and cities and school boards across the state. Their portion of these post-employment benefits received by retirees, actually get recorded in your statements now. But they don't get recorded in the governmental statements. They get recorded in Exhibits 1 and 2. You know, as we went straight to Exhibit 3, that's where we look at the funds. Your business type fund is a little different. You actually have to record those liabilities right within the fund. So your fund balance in that fund is a negative $1 million. But you've got $2.7 million in the bank. So very healthy fund, but a negative fund balance, and that's because of those post-employment benefits. We're actually going to see the accounting standards issued related to these pension disclosures is changing next year. Those pension amounts are actually going to be moved over into an agency fund by themselves. So we can go back to looking at fund balance in the child nutrition fund. But again, whether we're looking at fund balance or not, cash is always cash. Cash is always important. And you can actually look at the change in cash on page 23. This is a cash flow statement. Usually a statement I wouldn't go over, but now because fund balance is in the negative, cash is a better indicator of financial activity for the year. Because these pension liabilities, they'll go up and down, and they're non-cash expenses. This year you had pension liabilities going up and post-employment benefits going down. You actually had pension revenue. So again, you can't really look at fund balance in that fund anymore. You look at cash, and in the middle of page 23, you used $70,769 of cash. And so when you look at compared to the $2.8 million on hand, that's about break even. You can use $70,000 of cash for quite a few years when you've got $2.8 million in the bank. So again, given all the weather-related events, only using $70,000 in cash with again so much going on this year, that's again as close to break even as you can get. So that compares to using $106,000 the year before. So again, right in line and comparable to the previous year, but with fewer days and missed days, so a lot going on there, but still relative break even. Any questions? All right. Real quickly, page 65. At the top of page 65, under your state revenues, there's a new line, that Hurricane Florence disaster recovery. That's that $9.6 million received from DPI. So that's where you can find that specific line. It's on page 65. And then normally we don't look at these CAFR schedules because again they're just informational, but they show 10 years worth of data. And so in a year where you added $3 million of fund balance, I just kind of wanted to put it in perspective and point out on page 74. Page 74 is a 10-year schedule of your governmental fund balance. And so when you look at the 2019 column, your general fund, which is the line right in the middle, so you first have your detail of your general fund, and then you have your other governmental funds fund balance. But if you look at the far column, 2019, general fund, $12.8 million. And you can go back, and that $12.8 million is still less than your 2012 levels of $14.2 million. So since 2012, you've been using fund balance, and this year added. So again, that just kind of gives a little context of the history of fund balance over the last 10 years. All right, after that, we have our compliance section. So our audit is not just financial based, it's also compliance related as far as your spending of your state and federal dollars. We verify that for the programs that we audit as major, that you spent those dollars in accordance with the program. And we audited the state public school fund like we do every year. That's your largest fund, your largest pot of money, and so it has to be audited every year for compliance. On the federal side, we audited Title I. We do your federal programs in rotation. They have to be audited once every 3 years. Your big federal programs are EC, Title I, and Child Nutrition. But then new this year, we also audited that Hurricane Florence money because it did come from DPI. It was a state award. We had to audit those expenditures to make sure they were in compliance with the very few guidelines laid out, but still nonetheless audited for compliance. So, and through that, the letters in the back of the statement say we had no audit findings, no question costs, and no instances of internal controls, deviations in internal controls. So, again, all in all, a clean audit opinion and a couple of highlighted numbers there. That's all I have for my presentation. Again, if there's any questions, feel free to ask. I know you just received these numbers or this report. These numbers are ones that are presented to you on an ongoing basis. I'm here again to tell you that they're accurate and that throughout the year, again, our audit procedures do occur throughout the year. We didn't see any significant deviations or variances from the numbers being reported or on the general ledger during the year. So again, these numbers, we're looking at June 30, 2019. We're looking 6 months back. There's already a lot more important decisions about budgets or not budgets going on in the future. But again, we're just looking back to let you know that for the last 12 months at least, the statements and management have been accurately recording revenues and expenditures.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Cook.
Yes. Is Isaac Perry with us now? All right. We're going to interrupt this next part, and we'll have Isaac come up and receive his special award.
Isaac Perry, first grader, Jesse Mailer Road.
Your dad got your certificate. We're going to give you a card. We'll give you this picture. We're going to look right here. We're going to take a picture with you.
All right, and now we'll have West Brunswick High School's School Improvement Plan. Ms. Benton? Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. We apologize for not being here at the committee meeting in November. Things happened in the high school is what I'm going to leave it at. It was a busy day, so just a little bit busy. So we will present our goals that we have been working on with our school improvement plan, and looking at the 5 different areas that we decided as a school that we needed to focus on. So our first one was our student attendance, and we have looked at what we've done over the last 2 years with attendance and decided that we would continue some of the practices that we had put in place. Driver's license revocation, basically, we've been working with DMV and with the state, following the state guidelines. And if a student's not passing 70% of their classes, at the end of the semester, we can revoke their license. And that's one of the carrots we can use with high school kids. There's not a lot of carrots, as I call them out there, but that is one we've been able to use. We started that last year, and we basically do it at the end of the semester. We meet with the kids throughout the semester to have that conversation about this is where you're headed if things don't improve. And we were very happy with the fact that all our kids, except for 2, by the end of that semester, had brought their grades up and had been attending school and passing their classes. So we felt like it worked. It is a lot of details, but we felt like we got our bang for our buck out of that one, so that we will continue with that one. We do weekly attendance meetings with our committee, and that committee consists of myself, sometimes another administrator, depending on the timing, one of our guidance counselors who was our dropout prevention person last year, as well as 2 teachers and our social worker. So we meet each week, and we meet with kids. We pull the list every week, so those letters that go out at 6 days and 10 days, we look at those students. We even do some contracts with some of those students. We pull them in, have a conversation. Here's what your grades are. Here's what your attendance looks like, why we need you to come to school, and we have those conversations and do a contract with them, and then call the parent if we can't get the parent to come to school to have a conversation about the contract and say a copy of this contract is coming home. We call our parents every day, of course, and then we work on our forms, which is the paperwork piece, and then just continuously with those students that are absent. And it might be for just one period, not the whole day, but we're looking at each period of the day. We continue to work through this process, and continuing that process and doing that, our goal is to improve our attendance by 1% from 91 to 92% for this coming school year. Our second goal looked at our PBIS implementation and our discipline information that we had, and after looking at that, we decided we wanted to decrease our referrals and the loss of instructional time by 5% as a result of training our staff in the de-escalation aspect of the mindset training and through increased implementation of our PBIS strategies. And we've already done part of that. Nancy Bryant, who is our behavior specialist, has done 2 workshops on planning period days with our staff dealing with de-escalation, some of the mental health behaviors that we are dealing with our students, and has also done the mindset piece as well. So we are continuing to work on that. We're continuing with PBIS, and because of our restructuring with MTSS this year, we have combined school improvement, MTSS, and PBIS as one committee. So we meet twice a month, and we continue to look at our data each time we meet to see how many referrals do we have, where are those referrals coming from, is a particular class or particular area in school. We continue to look at that data as well as some of the chronic offenders, as we call them, our repeat offenders that continue to come through, and what can we do with those students, and having conferences with those students as well. And we continue to reteach our staff about our implementation of PBIS and what our expectations are with our positive behavior support program. So we continue with that as well. And just trying to have a common language and general expectations across the board for our staff. So we are hoping to decrease that by 5%, and we monitor it every month to see where we are. And we felt like that was a big goal, but we felt like we could make it happen.
It's been this last week or so, or last month or so, you've caught it pretty hard.
We have, and I feel like.
I hope we're drawing that line in the sand and letting
We
the schools
are.
know that we're not tolerating this.
We
stuff.
are, and that's a difficult one, and that's why I was concerned when we went 5%, but I feel like we have to have a high expectation, and just, as I tell them all the time when we talk about these kids and dealing with some of these situations we've had, if you tell kids something and that's your expectation, then you need to follow through. And that's not always easy, and that may, be reflected in these numbers, and we may not reach this goal because of that, but I feel like we have an obligation, if we tell kids something and have an expectation, we have to follow through.
I think Dr. Oates is working on a message too, that with the law enforcement and
Yeah.
sheriff stuff's going to try to really drive that home in all of our schools with these frivolous comments and stuff being made on
Absolutely,
social media.
yeah. And I do
But we're not
appreciate-
taking it lightly.
Yeah, I know that, and I appreciate everything that the sheriff's department has done for us, because,
It's been a rough month for you.
it's been a rough month, and I will tell you, we turned around one day, and within seconds, we were covered with the sheriff's department, so I appreciate that.
We take it serious.
Yeah. Goal 3 for us deals with, Goal 3, 4, and 5 deal with our 3 EOC areas. Goal 3 is our biology, and our students met growth in biology, but we wanted to focus on our proficiency because that's what the state formula looks at. And so they wanted to increase their proficiency by 5%. So we're continuing focusing on what we call Tier 2 words, which is vocabulary basically for biology that we've been pulling. We work a lot with our instructional coach, Jamie Smith, who is wonderful. We do small group pullouts with tutoring. We use our O69 at-risk money to fund that tutoring. We continue with EOC questions as hall passes, and that's just kind of implementing just some strategies with kids. We're increasing our use of technology. We're at like 94% now, and so we continue to utilize that. Test remediation and retaking, again, reteaching the skills that the kids do not get in a particular unit. We have looked at our EVOS data and looking at individual kids, looking at individual teachers, and looking at different strategies that work with certain groups of kids versus other classes. And we have we being the administrative team, the instructional coach, and our biology teachers, we meet once a month. We sit down, look at their data to see where they are and where they're going from this month to next month. In between that, they are still meeting as a PLC on a weekly basis, and Jamie Smith is meeting with them once a week as well. And we continue to work on, this was kind of a new idea, curriculum support through the website, is trying to get some resources on our website so that students and parents could get on there and get some of those resources, because you have parents who say, how can I help my kid? And so having that conversation, here are some other ways to get some resources out to our parents. So with that, hopefully we will increase our proficiency by 5% in biology.
Ms. Benton, when you say group pull-out tutoring, tell me more about that. Is that just an intervention? Is that in addition to the regular class, or is that?
It's
in
an
lieu
intervention.
of?
It's an intervention, and so what occurs is, once they finish a unit, if you have 3 students who didn't do well on that particular assessment, then the tutor will actually, she's a retired teacher, she will actually pull those students out and went into the hallway or into a small area and work with those 3 students on the skills in that particular unit. And
But
she's
they're
been,
not missing the overall
no,
instruction.
no, they're just kind of getting reinforced.
And when you say increased use of technology, go back to that one and tell me just a little bit more about that. Is that on the student end or instructional end?
A little bit of both. In our biology department, we have some teachers who I would say shy away from technology to a certain point. And so we've encouraged them, and part of their growth plan this year for our school, every teacher in our school has a technology goal. And so we've encouraged them to incorporate it in part of their instruction more, and then also to get it in the hands of students. And Jamie has been wonderful with helping us figure out ways to get it in the hands of kids, and still teachers are uncomfortable if they're, so they've got to learn it first. So trying to mesh that together, Jamie has worked really hard to help us try to find those connections as well. And Acacia worked with us last year and at the beginning of this year too with the technology walkthroughs to give us feedback that we can provide to those teachers as well.
And are we at one-to-one devices at Westland?
No, ma'am, we're at like 94%.
94%.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're getting there.
We're getting there, yeah. We're closer than we were. Goal 4 deals with our Math 1 students, and again, they met growth, so they wanted to really focus in on their proficiency, and they wanted to improve it by 8%. Again, we have a group of our Math 1 that they do standard-based grading, and so we have those students in Foundations first semester, and then they have Math 1 second semester, and so they are really targeting in on specific learning targets, and the student has to be proficient on a learning target before they can move to the next target. Again, they are doing some small group pull-out tutoring as well. Our math department has tutoring after school every day of the week, including Friday. We have 2 math teachers that offer tutoring after school on Fridays. So they have a little bit of both types of tutoring going on in the math department. Again, they want to increase their use of technology and do some remediation and retaking of assessments. They are also looking at their individual EVOS data and also working with trying to get that website, as many resources as we can on our website for our parents to have access to. Our math department, PLC, they meet once a month as well with administration and with the other Jamie Harris, who is our instructional coach, and looking at their data and their common formative assessments as well. So we have 2 things going on with Math 1. We have semester classes, and then we have our year-long classes that are our foundations kids. And those kids are chosen based on their math scores when set in the 8th grade.
So your math PLCs meet once per month, not once per week?
No, they meet once a week, but they meet with administration and with the instructional coach after school once a month, and we look at where they are and what they've been able to do, and then we meet the next month again as well. But they're meeting once a week.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you
ma'am.
for clarifying that.
And then our last goal addresses our English 2, and English 2 was our weakness. We met growth in all our other areas, and this is the area that we really wanted to focus on. So we talked about different components of English 2, looking at the nonfiction piece as well as analysis, and looking at best practices, and looking at our standard aligned instruction. And we spent quite a bit of time with Leslie, who's an instructional coach, looking at those specific information, especially when we got eval scores, looking at where our weaknesses were. And so with that, we hope to improve our scores by 5% as well. One of the unique things about the English 2 PLC, and actually the whole English department did it last year and they're doing it again this year, is they do professional development. So Leslie has them do a survey, and then she actually works with them, and they organize professional development for small groups within that department. So if I want to work on nonfiction, but my colleague feels like nonfiction is a strength and they want to work on something else, she puts them in those small groups, and they do PD within that department, but it's individualized. So it may be a very small group that she works with. Again, they're wanting to increase their use of technology and then writing across the contents, and we are trying to push vocabulary across all contents in our school. And so, for example, we've pushed out some common vocabulary, and we've asked, for example, PE department, how can you utilize this vocabulary within your department? And so we're using some of that and trying to branch that out as well. And we're continuing to use best practices, trying to work with a lot of times just content-specific words. If kids know vocabulary, sometimes that will help them with the pieces of reading a passage or a document. Something that we have found, our kids, their readiness rate for our kids coming to us, our kids, how that's determined, the state looks at the number of students that are proficient in reading and math as ninth graders or incoming freshmen, and it's based on their eighth grade scores. Our readiness of our kids has dropped from 37 to 35% to 16%. And so our kids are coming to us basically as non-readers. And so we are trying to figure out what strategies and techniques we can put in place as freshmen with them. And so we have started something very similar to Foundations. We have a Foundations class for English, and so we put some of those students in there, and they actually have Foundations first semester, and then they have their English class second semester, trying to build some of those skills that they are missing as readers when they come to us in ninth grade. So we are continuing to look at that as well. So that's kind of our goals. I also provided you with a handout that has a little more breakdown of data that I will not go over, but I just kind of share with you. We looked at each of the 3 EOC areas and how many teachers met goal or exceeded goals growth this year. And then we looked at, for example, we know that English was our weakest area last year. 2 of our English teachers were in the -6 and -5 in growth. Those 2 teachers are no longer at West Brunswick. So, we have to factor those pieces into our puzzle, looking at that, and then who we hired in their places, and working with those teachers as well, because new teachers, have giving them the resources they need and the support they need to be in a tested area, and making sure they have what they need. So that was part of the packet that you have also, is the breakdown of data and teachers and who met growth and who did not. We also included our clientele has changed. Our population is much larger than it's been in the past. We talked about our readiness rate, and it is running around 16% right now with our incoming freshmen. Our economically disadvantaged population is growing. And so we also looked at that and looked at our clientele in general. Our population is changing and our students, because I believe you have to teach different students different ways. And so we really have to know our kids. And so they're coming to us differently. And so I've said to staff, what are you going to do differently to make sure these kids are successful? So we've looked at that as well. Another piece that I included for you was some information that we shared with staff. A couple of new things we're doing this year. We're doing a failure list, and so at the end of each 9 weeks, they have to do a failure list. They have to run a roster out of PowerSchool that shows any student that's not passing their class. They have to give us the parent contact information. How many times have you contacted this parent? What conversations have you had with the kid? They provide that to the counselor so that the counselor can have a conference with the student as well. So we've been trying to implement that this year.
Going back to
Yes, ma'am.
the economically disadvantaged students, what do you attribute the change to? I mean, I know you said our clientele is changing, but how? I mean, are we having more students to move into the area, or what do you think might be behind all that?
We talk about that quite a bit. I think one of the things that we noticed is that it had decreased in 17, 18, and then last year it went back up again. I think part of that was probably the hurricane, because we had 25 families that we know of that lost their homes. And some of those students actually didn't get back into their homes until this school year, so they were, basically homeless for a year. And so we feel like that impacted us for this particular year. I think there's a lot of things going on. I think some of them are moving in, because we've had a lot of students that are moving in with families. So I think it's some of that, as well as just it depends on the jobs in our area. But I really believe the hurricane impacted us last year with a higher number, probably.
I go back to the readiness rate. That's very concerning.
Yes, ma'am.
37% is concerning, but 16%, And my question or thought is, should those kids be going to the ninth grade academy? And then if they do, when they come from the ninth grade academy, are they ready for 10th grade? And is that giving, are you having to have new classes? Are you having to have more classes to get these kids where they need to be? I mean, are you having to add teachers, you have to add classes, or you had to?
We've had to change the structure of our class. So for example, in Math 1, we have more foundation classes because of the readiness of our kids coming in for those freshmen. And so we've had to create more foundations classes, which impacts your schedule because you've got to pull those teachers to teach foundations, and then Math 1, which is a year-long class, so that impacts the numbers of your other math classes. So yeah, it's impacted. We've had to restructure schedules, who's teaching what. We've had to restructure all those pieces as well.
And why are they coming from 8th grade with that kind of readiness? That's not even ready. I mean, 50% is not even ready.
Right.
75% is not even ready.
I mean, Mr. Cheese and I talked about it.
That's very
I sat down with
concerning.
him in my office and said,
And I don't know if
"No,
that's the
this
same with all the high schools, or if that's just unique to you.
My research that I had, that I talked to Mr. Cheers with, the other two high schools were running in the high 30s as well, low 40s, and we're continuing to be there. For some reason, we've dropped in our area. And then one of the things we talked about, and I don't know if we could, and this might be a Daryl and Amanda question, but, you know, that 16.9%, who are they? And we can figure that piece out, but, you know, figuring out who specifically they are and where are they coming from to look at programs. Because having done K-12, you've got to look down, you know, not blaming anybody, but you have to look down and where are these kids coming from, you know, and what is maybe going, what are we missing? I don't know. But that was concerning for us as a school, because we were like, wow, if, you know, this is, we've got to change what we're doing in freshman year. Because our students.
Or what they're doing in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. That needs to change before they even get there. They shouldn't even be getting there at that rate.
Right.
I don't feel like, but that's, you know.
It's a concern for us, and I have said to staff all year long, our clientele is changing. And so we have to look at our students and who they are and where they are when they come to us, because that determines how you teach and how you present with the information they need.
And you may not know that till the beginning of the school year.
Right.
I mean, you'll know it a little bit, but you may not know that, and then you may have to add classes and your schedule changes and all that, and,
Right.
and that's a huge burden for you to have to undertake.
Trying to figure it out. So it's been a learning curve for us. I mean, it really has, because we've had to change some schedules and do some restructuring of some things.
How is the AIG kids, if you're getting them low, then I wouldn't think that the AIG kids would be a negative 2.5 or 2.6. There's still something we're missing there. I mean, it's, because that's your top kids that are going to be, are they just not being challenged enough because we don't have the class space and the advancing of classes for them? We're missing something because it's a straight drop across all subjects, not even just low kids coming in, the high kids are coming in and going backwards.
So our reading is our area of concern, which is where we didn't meet growth, and we noticed that if you look, our Hispanic and our students with disabilities were only two groups in reading that met growth in English 2. And so we've had to really look at English 2 and what happened in there. Looking at the numbers, again, the two teachers that didn't have growth are no longer with us.
And you're using your EVA scores for when you're doing your evaluations on the teachers, you have them on plans if they didn't make growth last year?
Yeah, we do. We have conversations with them, yes. And reading is one of those areas where it's hard to target in. Math is easier to target in on a weakness. Reading is more difficult to build. So, but again, looking at the data, when you pull it apart and you look at all the teachers that create that pot for English 2, it's significant what I've heard is because of two people on their scores. So, and looking at this and having conversations with our school improvement team, basically we kind of said there were two areas of needs, and actually there's three. One of the ones we wanted to talk about was our population. We have grown tremendously. That growth has created a lot of things for us. Number one, our classes are bigger than they've ever been. We are now 9 modular units. I have 3 teachers on carts, which means they don't have classrooms. And so we are continuing to kind of deal with that population growth. One of the things that we feel like has impacted us greatly, we lost an administrator this past year, and when we look across the board, and I know we have formulas, and I understand that, but when you look at the data, if you look at our numbers, the load that we are carrying per administrator at West is much higher than the other high schools or the other schools with 3 administrators. If we had our 5th administrator, we would still be higher, but we would still be in the ballpark, so to speak. So if you look at it with 4 administrators, we're carrying about 371 kids apiece. If we had the 5th one, we would be at 296, which would still be more than the others, but it's in the ballpark. So we feel like that is an area that we definitely need to look at, and that is a concern for us. With everything that's going on, it's hard to be everywhere you need to be, and trying to deal with the population of students and the movement of students and those types of things. And when you're pulled for the kind of incidents that we've been pulled for the last month, it's hard to be in a classroom and working with a teacher or coaching a teacher and doing those types of things. And so we feel like that additional administrator back would be a huge plus for us to help us meet the needs of the kids and the staff as well. The second need that we had was just a sense of urgency. And again, I understand formulas and deadlines. One of the things that is very different in high school and in K-8 is that you don't have your EOCs or EOGs until the end of the year. We have our first round in 9 days. And because of that, we are, with spending in different pieces, we don't meet those deadlines. So for example, and we had 069 money, which we've utilized, but we were able to push through that process, and it was this past Monday before we actually got our program up and running with our 069 money. That's 9 days before our exams start. So we need flexibility somehow to make sure that we can get the things that we need because the semester is ending rather than a year long. And that's kind of where we were with that, was just making sure we can get what we need, whether it's technology that teachers want or it's some reinforcements or resources they want. And then the last thing was space. I didn't include it on here, but like I said, we've got 9 modular units and 3 teachers on carts, and we're maxed out. We can take anything that we can get when it comes to space. I know we're getting an addition and we're excited about that, but I can fill it up today, so we need some space at West Brunswick.
When is that addition scheduled to be completed, Ms. Benton?
Completed 2021, correct?
Okay, so that's the final phase of the bond?
Is that right? 2021? Second phase, right? 2021?
It starts this July. Construction starts July. And then we'll do everything for the next school year, so August.
Okay.
I am now looking at the Freshman Academy information, and that's 25 students from Freshman Academy. 100% needed Math 1 and PE.
Yes, ma'am.
So what are we doing at Freshman Academy? If they're supposed to have those requirements when they get there, then that doesn't seem like it's working.
We're in the process now of looking at actually how the students are going from the transit from the 9th grade academy and taking a closer look at what's happening in there, making sure that they're being prepared for the high schools. Because I agree, there's no need to
those classes
send students there if they're not being prepared. If it's a readiness program for students to go into high school and be prepared for high school, and it's not working for them.
Because if they're supposed to go in sophomores, they don't have the credits,
Correct.
then
Well, I don't think that's saying they don't have credit. They can leave the academy with 6 or 8 credits. They just don't have the math and PE, so that doesn't affect graduation at all.
They can have the credit. Some of them do, some of them don't.
Well, that's
Yeah.
typical of any student.
Right.
So I don't blame the freshman academy if the kids are going to the high school with 6 or 8 credits, which is what they're all getting in the normal setting. So I'm not relating to that as a negative.
but as a requirement for a freshman.
No, it's not a requirement for a freshman.
No, I'm saying the PE.
It's not a requirement of a freshman. You can take it any time in high school.
What
But
impacted
typically
us
for
was
their
that-
scheduling, I'm just thinking for
Right,
your
these students
scheduling,
came
it's
to us
typical.
and didn't have Math 1, and so we've had to incorporate those sophomore kids into our classes, which created larger Math 1 classes for us, and so we had to redo some scheduling there. The other thing is the kids are resentful, I guess is the best word, that they are sitting in freshman classes and they're not freshmen. And so we've had to deal with some of that, which we deal with, but it makes it difficult when they're coming to us. And Dr. Hudson and I have a long discussion about this. It makes it difficult when those kids are coming from freshman academy, which always is already, they've got to get used to becoming part of West Brunswick as sophomores.
Well, I
And it
thought
makes
you
it
had all these
difficult.
ninth graders you were having to put in this remediation math, that they're behind just like the kids coming from the freshman academy.
Right.
So how are they affected? How are they affected? Are they have the same attitude as the freshman academy kids? I'm not relating.
They're freshmen, and so they're with freshmen.
Right.
These students see themselves as sophomores, which the majority of them are, and so they are sitting, and they've said to us, we're sitting in a classroom full of freshmen. Yeah, we understand.
one.
And so we continue to work on that, and it's just, it's kind of like becoming a part of, and so it's kind of difficult for them. I mean,
But
the
so
kids
are
share
your,
that with us.
but so are your kids that are on campus as ninth graders who have to do remediation math. They're sitting in there with freshmen in math 1 also.
But they're not sophomores, and that's the difference. That's what the kids have said to us. We're sophomores, and we're sitting in a classroom full of freshmen. I mean, it's just-
immaterial.
Well, they've already been somewhere where they should have gotten the Math 1. Is my,
Well, they should have passed it, but it doesn't mean because they go to the freshman academy, they're going to pass math.
And they just sat in classes with juniors over at the CT, if they took CTE classes while they were there, right? They just sat in classes with juniors and didn't have a problem with that. So I guess either way, we're mixing them up. Not everybody, some people retake math, I guess, right, your second year because they don't make it, so.
It's just a concern for us, and if that's going to be, and we had a long conversation, if that's going to be, the expectation, they're coming from freshman academy, they're going to need Math 1, we just need to know that because that impacts our scheduling, that impacts our classes.
The
We
kids
just-
who are sent to a freshman academy are totally unsuccessful eighth graders. The goal of the freshman academy, to me, is for them to leave that year as successful ninth grade students with credits.
Right.
I don't care what they are. I just want them to be successful, so when they get to the regular setting again, they have some sense of pride and efficiency so they can move forward. Now, if they go to the freshman academy and they're failing math and all these other courses, we can shut it down because that's, to me, not the purpose. I want them to leave there successful. I don't care if they're all vocational courses, as long as they leave there with 6 or 8 credits. because they can make up those courses in the next 3 years.
They can make them up. It's just,
So I
for
don't
the
like,
kids,
you
it's
know,
just, the kids, we've dealt with the kids this year. And again, if we know they're coming, we will deal with it, but it impacted our schedule, and the kids have shared with us that they
Another
they
question.
struggle with that.
I don't relate to the 16.9% proficient in relation to not meeting growth. I don't know how that affects growth. So if you receive kids who are 16.9% proficient as ninth graders, I don't know how that still affects them in the ninth grade meeting growth.
Well, we're looking at growth and proficiency.
I
So we can
realize
get
you-
growth-
I
we can
realize
get
you
growth
are,
out of
but-
those kids, absolutely we can.
But
It's
when I
just
look at
concerning
this-
to me that they come to us at that level of
But
proficiency.
I'm looking at a minus 3.85 overall, not making growth at West.
Right?
I think we better start making growth.
We are, we will, we have.
Well, you might need some more.
Ma'am?
I know in the past, I wasn't at the last curriculum meeting, but, you know, we've talked about what things, I know you said what you need, but is there anything else that you need besides what you, I mean, to help facilitate? You've shared
We
everything.
can
that
get
we-
resources and we can get, you know, in a timely manner, especially like I said, that with semesters. We will be fine. Our kids will be fine and our teachers, yeah. And again, these are not excuses. All this is data. You know, I believe we have to take what we get. It's our reality, and we have to peel it apart. And that's what it is we've just kind of peeled it apart to see what we have, which is the same thing I've said to all the teachers.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have the principal's voice, now we'll have the teacher's voice. Mr. Cartha.
Good evening. I'm here to give you all a recap on our previous November 14th TAC meeting. Schools are establishing a student voice within their buildings, and that looks different from school to school. Sometimes it might be, I know, talking to Ms. Barefoot, it might be the newspaper at West Brunswick High School, it might be a student advisory council, it could be a student government. And right now we're collecting and analyzing student concerns within each school. And tonight I'll share a few of those concerns that we've talked about at our last TAC meeting. I know right now, I believe with Jesse May Elementary, students are concerned with trying to find ways to help their custodial staff. And I think that's pretty awesome that our students are seeing some of the things that their school's struggling with. The solutions were awesome, and they're raw and they're pure. The solution there was purchasing small brooms and mops to help our custodial staff. And I know when Mr. Siemens was in there listening to that, I think he foresaw a PR nightmare with, you know, kids sweeping and mopping a cafeteria. But nonetheless, it's still our students giving their feedback on what they believe is important to them. At Belleville Elementary, our students there are discussing the lunch selection process. I know that some of the students there are upset. Just like any of us, you go to a restaurant and something's on the menu and you order it and it's not there. It gets a little frustrating. And what's happening now, from what I infer at our last TAC meeting, Belleville Elementary has a high enrollment rate. So the students that are getting there last at lunch, thinking that the menus, pizza and nachos, get there and they're no longer available. It might seem frivolous to us, but for them, that's a deal breaker, and that can really change a kid's perspective for the rest of the day. So I think right now Belleville's trying to find ways to redirect that and find ways to make sure that students have the same selections. And again, those are things that are easy to fix for us as adults, but I think it's awesome that we're slowly kind of thinking about what do our kids, what's important to our kids, what is it that they're thinking about throughout the day. At South Brunswick Middle School, we, in the last couple months, have tried to revamp PROW. And with the help of Molly White, MTSS, and our Student Advisor Council, we're getting there as well. Our next steps for TAC are to establish a SMART goal of some sort so that by the end of the year, what we're doing is attainable and can be measurable. And ultimately for me, I want to make sure that this doesn't just go away after a year. I really think it's important that we kind of change our perspectives as educators and make sure that we are looking at what our students need as well as what our teachers need. Our next TAC meeting is December 12th, and we look to kind of solidify what we're doing there as far as a goal. For me, particularly professionally at South Brunswick Middle School, I will tell you that this environment for me is something that I'm still getting used to. After 10 years of being in the county, I have appreciated the perspective that I have gotten, received from this platform as Teacher of the Year. We're calling it right now Proud 2.0 at our school. We have saw that what we were doing initially wasn't working. And again, with Ms. White and MTSS and our students, we met November 20th with our Student Advisory Council to get some input to what our students are feeling now that we've revamped our PROW usage. And our students are saying that it feels more personalized, interactive, and meaningful. And again, that's not coming from our teachers, it's not coming from our principals, it's coming from our students. That our students are feeling that time block is becoming more beneficial for them, which is huge. Just like a lot of schools in our county, we have been trying to implement restorative practices. And our Mindful Mondays have been well received by our students. Our students feel like they are able to establish better relationship with their peers and with their teachers. Their teachers are allowing them a platform similar to this to kind of voice their concerns, to look and make their classrooms and their experiences at South better. And again, it's all coming back to our students. Our next step at our school, and this is kind of where I'm using my experiences to share with TAC, is giving our kids ownership, just like we do as teachers in the classroom. We want to make sure kids have ownership to their school. So for me right now, just like some other schools have stressed their concern, our school sometimes needs the extra help when it comes to cleaning and making sure that things are tidy and clean. So right now, our custodial staff, talking to them, we're trying to make sure that we can help them out as best we can. So our National Junior Honor Society is currently creating a after game, the following morning cleanup schedule that they can use for community service hours, as well as helping our custodial staff that needs that help at South Clemson Middle School. Another thing that Mr. Ruth has initiated at our school is asking our students for input on how to promote better morale within students. Our school has seen a little increase in referrals, so just making sure that we're looking to our students to find ways to maybe abate the frequency of referrals and apathy in our school as well. And that's where we are. I look forward to meeting with you next year and kind of giving you more feedback to where we are with a student voice. And again, I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to have this platform, have this perspective, because it really has, I feel like in the last 10 years, it's made me grow a lot this year. And we all sit in meetings, we all sit here and listen to each other speak. And I will tell you, sitting in our conference room at South Middle, those are some of probably the most productive meetings and meaningful meetings I've had when our kids are in there talking, not just us. So it's been a great contribution to our school for sure to kind of see what our students are feeling and seeing in their perspective in their schools. Are there any questions that you have for me as far as where we're headed? All right. That's all I have. I know it's getting late, so I appreciate your time, and y'all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Belleville for us, Sue? You got it? All right. One extra case every week. Yeah, that's a big deal.
Here's Sue.
Yeah, one less chicken nuggets, one more pizza for that guy.
All right, I'll turn it over to Dr. Rhodes.
I got the gavel now.
Just 2 minutes of fame.
Sorry.
Don't enjoy it too much.
Trust me, I'm ready to give it right back. The organizational meeting of the Board of Education has been called to order. We have a quorum present, and one of the purposes of this meeting is the election of board officers. First order of business is the election of the chairman, and just as a reminder, nominations do not require a second, and no motion is needed to close the nomination. So this time, do I hear nominations for the office of board chair?
Dr. Rhodes, it's my honor and privilege to nominate my friend, Ms. Ellen Milligan, as chair for next school year.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor of Ms. Ellen Milligan as board chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record show that Ms. Ellen Milligan is duly nominated and elected as chairman of the Board of Education for 1-year term unanimously. Congratulations. There you go, Gavin.
You realize you don't get 2 minutes. Right?
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Thank you to the board for allowing me this opportunity. I am very grateful for that. And with that said, we will now entertain motion for a nomination for vice chair. So at this time, I would like to hear any nominations for vice chair, please.
I'd like to put Mr. Lemon up, please.
Okay, Mr. Lemon has been nominated for vice chair. Do I have another nomination? Okay. Seeing that there are no other nominations, all in favor of Mr. Lemon as vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With unanimous vote, and let the record show that Mr. Ed Lemon is duly elected as vice chair of Brunswick County School Board of Education for a 1-year term. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Now, we move to accustomed to somebody else doing this part, so bear with me. But now we move to the parliamentary procedure, and at this time, I would ask for an approval of the meeting agenda.
Madam Chair, I'm making a motion to approve with the deletion of, or to table one item that is on our action items number 2, fines and forfeiture resolution.
Okay.
I'd like to table that for further discussion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have Mr. Miller and Mr. Benton. All in favor of tabling this please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay. At this time, we need to approve minutes from November 5th, regular meeting, November 19th, Operations Committee, November 19th, Curriculum and Policy Committee, November 19th, Finance and HR.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the 5th and 19th.
Mr. Benton has made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Cook has made, seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Thank you. We are now at consent items for approval, and we have Project Search, MOU. Someone, is there anyone going to discuss that, or we just continue on? Okay. Budget calendar and budget amendments.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Miller, motion to approve.
Second.
Ms. Cook, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carried. Action items for approval, class size waiver, we took number 2 out, and pack change for Lincoln Elementary.
We'll begin with the class size waiver with Ms. Richardson, Mr. Foster, and myself. We'll kind of cover that one. Mr. Foster, you'd like to start?
Yes, sir. The class size waivers are required in cases where we exceeded the class size maximum as of the 40th day of school. And we had 2 schools that had individual situations where they had class size maximum greater or at greater than 22 in a class in K-3. Those 2 schools, Jessie May Monroe, were in the process of hiring a kindergarten teacher to alleviate that. So it was just a matter of the scheduling of those students. The best case scenario was, instead of having a sub teaching a classroom, they were in the process of hiring someone, so we have requested a waiver for that. And then at Bolivia Elementary School, there were, at the 3rd grade level, there were some overages there, again at 23 in a classroom, and they are in the process of making the appropriate adjustment to come within the class size maximum requirement there. So far as the process around that, we have provided enough resources in our allotment process to ensure that we meet the class size requirements on average across the whole district. We're in great shape in regards to our average class size in K-3. These individual class sizes that were at 23 instead of at 22, Bolivia, we had an increase in enrollment of over 5% from the beginning of the year until the 40th day. And so that grew in the 3rd grade, and we had not made the appropriate or the necessary adjustment in the schedule at the 40th day, but we are in the process of making that, and effective January 1st, those changes will be in place so that we will not have any K-3 classes that are above the 22 maximum that is required by the state.
That was a flux from the charter school, correct? We opened and then they purged a bunch of students, I think, in Bolivia?
Probably,
Yeah.
yes. I'm not certain of that, but it makes sense to me.
Any other questions? I think you handled that beautifully, Mr. Foster.
Thank you.
Approve the classroom size waiver.
Mr. Benton has made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And Ms. Cook has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
For the PAC change for Lincoln Elementary, in your board package, there are oh, there it is. Okay, good then. Now, on the screen as well, in addition to your board packets, you see there are 3 deletions and 3 additions for PAC members at Lincoln Elementary. These, of course, would need your approval, and we are bringing them to you tonight for approval.
Is there any reason they dropped off?
I don't have any information as to why.
We only needed 3, right? Oh, okay.
Okay.
Do I have a motion?
Approves changes at Lincoln PAC.
Second.
Mr. Lemon has made a motion for approval. Ms. Cook has seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. At this time, we have discussion announcement by superintendent and/or board members.
All right, I will begin very quickly, just to remind you, of course, the holiday season is upon us, and our arts department has put out the schedule for different arts performances, and we would definitely love to have your participation, presence at the numerous things that are happening across the district in our schools on each level. If you haven't gotten that information, please let me know and I will get that to you. Also, we will have a mid-year graduation ceremony this year. The ceremony will be on January 3rd, 2020 at Odell Williamson at 6:30. The early graduates from our traditional high schools, North, South, and West Brunswick high schools, have the opportunity to participate in the ceremony. It's not required. They can choose to participate in the early ceremony if they have met all graduation requirements by this time, and if they choose not to, they can participate in the traditional ceremony that we'll have in June. Each principal will award the diplomas to the students from their school. In the past, many early graduates have entered college, the military, or the workforce, and they were unable to return for the ceremonies that we've had at the end of the year. So this will give those students an opportunity for family and friends to participate in a graduation celebration at this mid-year point. There's no limit on the number of guests that the students may bring for this mid-year graduation, and we're anticipating at this point 47 total graduates, folks that are eligible for graduation mid-year, 30 from West, 15 from South, and 2 from North Brunswick. So we want to just make you aware of that ceremony that will be taking place. Lastly, I wanted to just give you a brief update as a board as to how the redistricting process is moving along. It's moving along well. We've received a lot of feedback from our public information sessions. We want to give the public another opportunity to do a gallery walk of sorts to look at the options that are presented. So we're looking at doing another public information session, gallery walk, to review all of the options that will be presented to you on December 16th at North Brunswick High School at 6 p.m. Just again, we'll just put those options out there for the public to see once more, give those who may have been unable to attend to see what the options are. That's on the 16th, and that's right before the committee meetings on the 17th, where the operations committee will then bring those same options to the board for review. Our January board meeting, January 7th at 6 p.m., will be a regular board meeting. However, we will have an extended period for public comment in regard to primarily the redistricting process. Any comments the public will want to make, we'll give them definitely pretty much the time that they need to do that. We will work with the board chair and vice chair, making sure our agenda will be able to accommodate the public comment and everything of the business of the board in a timely fashion. And of course, January 14th, the board will be meeting in a called meeting to select the actual options for redistricting. But I want to make sure that everyone was aware of this timeline. And although Mr. Siemens is not here tonight, he will put this information out as soon as possible tonight, so the public will know the steps that we're taking for redistricting. And that's all I have.
Anyone else? Okay. At this time, do I have a motion to enter into closed session? Okay. Mr. Miller has made the motion. Second. Ms. Cook has seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? At this time, we will go into closed session. Thank you. Yes. 5 minutes. And don't be late.
Already ordered us around.
That's that teacher voice.